27 News WKOW. Here's what's happening right now.
Tensions are high in Minneapolis as lawyers prepare for closing arguments today. What you can expect from the courtroom later on. Plus,
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
A group of activists marched downtown Madison calling for equality, the action they say they want to see happen now. And
I was like, please tell me you're safe. Please tell me you're not at the bar.
a shooting at a Kenosha bar leaves a community on edge. The charges the suspect is facing this morning.
We've got you covered. This is 27 News. Wake up, Wisconsin.
Good morning. Thanks for starting your day with us. I'm Rebecca Rively.
And I'm Nick Buffo. Today is Monday, April 19th. It is going to be a cooler start to our day today. So let's go right ahead over to meteorologist Max Aparis, who is tracking a few in a few minutes. All right, Max, thank you. 27 News time is 5:31. Right now, the city of Minneapolis is boarded up and tensions are high ahead of closing arguments in the Derek Chauvin trial. There is barbed wire and police barricades all across the city. The National Guard is also there ahead of any riots or protests that may happen.
And ahead of the closing arguments today, crowds of people gathered and they protested over the weekend. When the jury reconvenes, it will be able to decide if Chauvin is guilty of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, manslaughter, or they could acquit him altogether. ABC's Ike Kajashi is in Minneapolis with what we can expect from the courtroom.
This morning, anticipation in the streets of Minneapolis. Crowds gathering at the now infamous corner where George Floyd was pinned to the pavement under Chauvin's knee for over 9 minutes. Tensions rising, all while 2,000 National Guard members line the streets on the eve of closing arguments. So far, 3 weeks of testimony from 45 witnesses, including George Floyd's loved ones, medical experts, and more than a dozen members of law enforcement. Chauvin is facing 3 charges: second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. He's pleaded not guilty.
The outcome that we pray for in Derek Chauvin is for him to be held criminally liable for killing George Floyd.
The prosecution arguing Chauvin's actions killed Floyd when he pinned him down to the ground for 9 minutes and 29 seconds.
A healthy person subjected to what Mr. Floyd was subjected to would have died as a result of what he was subjected to.
The defense claims it wasn't Chauvin's knee that ended Floyd's life, rather his drug use and untreated heart condition.
Remember that all the defense has to present is reasonable doubt. They don't have to prove that it occurred a certain way. In fact, their own expert in this case says it's uncertain as to what the cause of death is.
The city and a nation facing a racial reckoning, a week of consistent protests following the recent police shootings of Dante Wright and 13-year-old Adam Toledo. From coast to coast, preparations for unrest. In San Francisco, discretionary days off for all officers are canceled. The same in New York City. In the nation's capital, officers begin around-the-clock 12-hour shifts. And here in Minneapolis, public schools are moving to remote learning starting Wednesday. Minnesota Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan releasing a statement ahead of closing arguments. She was commenting on the recent police shootings in her state, saying Minnesota is a place where it's not safe to be black. Ike Kajashi, ABC News, Minneapolis.
All right, Ike, thanks for covering that. In ABC News, we'll have special coverage for the closing arguments starting at 9 a.m. our time.
Meanwhile, activists marched through the streets of downtown Madison yesterday afternoon. Organizers say the march was an opportunity for people in marginalized communities to support each other after recent national cases of violence against Black and Asian Americans. Eli Kapoor took part in that march. He says marches are good, but he also wants to see real changes when it comes to racial justice.
I love to see that there's a whole bunch of conversation about it, but I'm really bummed out that there's not more legislative actions being put in place to prevent stuff like this from happening.
After the march, the group stopped at the Capitol. Organizers shared stories about their own experiences with police officers and encouraged people to continually work for reform and equity.
It is 5:35 right now. Police say 2 people were hurt by a drive-by shooting in the Wisconsin Dells area. Lake Delton police say someone driving by Bobber's Island Grill on Wisconsin Dells Parkway fired at the bar around 1:30 Sunday morning. Bobber's went on lockdown right away after the shooting. 2 people were taken to the hospital with minor injuries. Police have not said if anyone has been arrested.
This morning, a suspect is in jail after a shooting at a bar in Kenosha County on Sunday. 3 people died and 3 are in the hospital right now. Officials spent most of the day yesterday looking for a suspect and announced late yesterday afternoon they have a person of interest in custody. The shooting happened just before 1 a.m. at the Summers House bar. One man who was there heard the gunshots ring out.
I heard 3 at first, but then there was so many after that it was like, wow, this is serious.
People in the area said they were scared for their loved ones. The sheriff says the suspect wasn't cooperating with management at the bar and was asked to leave. That person will now be charged with homicide.
The U.S. has seen a dramatic increase in mass shootings in recent weeks, and some officials see it as a second pandemic affecting the country. Analysts say the gun issue defines part of the way the world views the U.S. Some psychiatrists say these frequent shootings are causing Americans to become more desensitized toward gun violence.
The body naturally responds from the horror and the shock to try to protect ourselves by increasingly becoming numb.
Last month, the Democratic-led House approved a pair of gun reform bills that called for expanding background checks, but both pieces of legislation have stalled in the Senate.
Drug overdoses have been rising across the U.S. during the pandemic. New data from the CDC shows from September of 2019 to September of 2020, there was a nearly 30% increase in drug overdose deaths. And locally here in Wisconsin, the rise was 27%. Addiction centers have reported increases in calls as well. Doctors say people have turned to drugs to ease the stress of the pandemic.
Over time, you get to a place where you're taking the substance just to feel at baseline, and without it, you feel terrible. People are less likely to die if they do receive a medication, either methadone or buprenorphine. Sometimes people call it Suboxone.
Now, the important thing to know here is to seek help if you or a loved one are struggling with drug addiction. There are links to resources on the State Department of Health's website.
27 News Time is 5:38. Newly released data shows the COVID-19 vaccine is safe for pregnant women and can also provide protection for their baby. The data showed women who received the vaccine developed a more robust immune system compared to women who got infected naturally. They also found that vaccine-generated antibodies were passed to the babies through umbilical cord blood and breast milk. Doctors say this is good news for women who were hesitant before to get the vaccine.
I know that there's a lot of misinformation out there, but with a lot of campaign and education, is getting better. There's more uptake. Pregnant patients should always have an open discussion with the healthcare provider than to decline or be hesitant.
She says women who are trying to get pregnant also shouldn't be worried about getting the vaccine. According to the CDC, it's safe for them as well.
Meanwhile, vaccination numbers are increasing rapidly here in Wisconsin. More than 25% of people are now considered fully vaccinated, and 40% have gotten at least one dose. That's around 2.3 million people.
Today, every American is eligible for a COVID-19 vaccine in every state, but health officials are now facing another challenge. The demand for the vaccine is dropping in a number of states. A poll from Monmouth University shows about 1 in 5 adults say that they do not want the vaccine. It's for a variety of reasons, but doctors are reassuring people the vaccine is safe.
These vaccines are exceedingly safe. They're, I believe, safer than most therapies and vaccines that we have developed in the past.
The CDC says at least half of all adults in the U.S. have had at least one vaccine dose.
After a historic win at the Masters by Hideki Matsuyama, Asian Americans are expressing what the win meant to them.
And a warning for Peloton Tread Plus customers. Why a government agency wants you to stop using the machine immediately. 27 News Time is 5:40. You're watching Wake Up Wisconsin.